Okay, let's make a start. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stuart Sutherland and I'm the head of the school's digital team, and I'm your host for this webinar today. Now, a key point that I'd like to make at the very start here is that this is a relatively brief webinar to update trainees who are currently progressing into year 2 of the programme, in other words, trainees who began the programme in 2022, about some small changes to the assessment strategy on the STP. Now, we ran a briefing webinar last week for your trainers, for all trainers or trainees on the new curriculum. And today's webinar will introduce the changes we're making, and it'll be followed up very shortly with fuller details about these changes, which we'll publish on the school website. Today, we're not going to do a Q&A about the changes. We just want to announce them to you so you are aware of them. So our key job today is to introduce them and summarize them and to let you know where, when, and how you can find out more information as and when we publish it in the very near future on the school website. So to kick us off today, I'd like to hand you over to our interim head of school, Lisa Ayers, to make some introductory remarks.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Stuart, and thanks to everyone for joining the webinar today. So what we're going to cover today, there's a few different aspects to it. So we're going to be announcing some key changes to assessment. And this is going to be the start of what is really an extensive programme of communication that you're going to receive. So we're going to summarise those changes for you, and we'll identify when more information will be available, and we'll also outline where it is you can learn more. So Stuart's already mentioned about the website. So any of those sites that are going to be useful for you to get more information, we'll highlight today. Next slide, please. So this is part of the new assessment strategy, and this is part of a really big piece of work that's been going on in the school to review, clarify and revise the standards and expectations for training and assessment on the STP programme. Next slide, please. So you might be asking, why do we need a new assessment strategy for STP? Well, this really capitalises on the changes to the programme that have been introduced very recently through the curriculum review. And we want to have these fully developed earlier, ideally, but we're now introducing these to support you through this phase of your training, the specialty phase of your training. So the new curriculum was this opportunity to review and improve how this programme is assessed for your cohort, and also to really maintain and enhance the confidence of the healthcare science community in the quality of the STP programme and the trainees who complete it. Next slide, please. So what's included in the new assessment strategy? So for you, the assessment changes we're going to look at are the standards for the in-person work-based assessments, and also just a brief summary of the new final assessment. And for future cohorts, what will be relevant to them is also a new progression strategy. So we're introducing these new standards for in-person workplace assessments, and we're going to be talking a lot more about them in just a moment. But there will also be changes that you might hear about that are not going to affect you because they're going to be about future cohorts. And this includes introducing the new progression strategy, which will apply to future cohorts. So just in case that ever gets confusing, there are some of the changes which are relevant to you as the 2022 cohorts. There are other changes that are going to be coming in a little bit later. Okay. Thanks very much, Stuart.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. So to introduce the work we're shortly to publish on work-based assessment standards, which Lisa alluded to there, I'd like to hand you over to Chris Fisher, the school's curriculum manager.
Thanks, Stuart. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to talk a little bit around the work-based assessment standards that we're going to introduce for you. So firstly, the reason we're introducing these standards is we had identified some issues with the work-based assessment. So what assessment issues did we want to address by introducing these standards? So first of all, after many conversations with many of you on many occasions, not least for me during the curriculum review process, we've identified that the way in which work-based assessments are conducted is very variable. Your experience may be different to a trainees at a different department, which may be different again from a trainees at another department. And as a result, that leads you to have concerns about whether local practice and assessment are up to the expected common standard. Adding to that as well, so far the school has provided very limited guidance on how these work-based assessments should be conducted. So it's that gap that we're looking to fill by introducing these work-based assessments. So to address these issues, the school has decided that we will create and support a set of work-based assessment standards for the conduct of work-based assessments. We're going to be publishing these work-based assessment standards by the end of September. So along the way, you may have heard about or even been involved in conversations about external assessments in the workplace and possibly even digital recording of work-based assessments in the workplace. So I just want to be really clear with you this morning, we are not progressing with that work. We are not expecting you to conduct external assessments in the workplace. If you have been involved in that conversation or if you have been involved in that test of the digital assessments, I do want to say a huge thank you. Everything we've learned from those conversations, we have put into the development of the work-based assessment standards, but just to be clear, we are not proceeding with external assessments in the workplace. So why did we want to develop the work-based assessment standards? So first of all, to answer many of those issues. To ensure there is greater standardisation of assessment within the STP, so trainees and assessors will be working to a set of published standards for performing an assessor's work-based assessments. As Lisa referenced, we want to make sure that the healthcare science community has more assurance that the assessment of trainees is meeting a common standard and the confidence in the quality of the STP and you as the trainees who complete it. We also want to provide you as trainees with reassurance that the assessment of your skills in your department is robust, is fair, and is equitable. In essence, that you're all having a very similar experience, which we know is not always happening at the moment. So what do STP work-based assessment standards mean for you as trainees and for your trainers as well? So the standards are going to provide everybody involved in that assessment with clarity about what is expected of them. And we are going to publish those standards and make available everybody's role for everybody involved in that assessment. So not only will you be able to see what is expected as you of a trainee, but you'll also be able to see what is expected of your assessors as well. We'll be asking you all to work for the new STP work-based assessment standards for the in-person assessments from October. They'll be published in September, so we'll ask you to work with those as soon as they are published for your work-based assessments. So those standards are going to sharpen and clarify our expectations of how work-based assessments are conducted, but they shouldn't require radical overhaul of your experience of those assessments so far. We're not trying to make this more difficult for anybody to be involved in your assessments. We know that assessors often don't have a lot of time. This is about an evolution of the assessments, not a complete revolution. So you might see some shift in how you experience your assessments, but this is not going to be radical overhaul. We don't want to make it more difficult to have people engage in your training, but we do want to make sure you're all having a more similar experience of your training. So what are the work-based assessments standards going to contain? So first of all, we're going to publish a work-based assessment for every type of assessment. So for the in-person assessments, that's DOPS, OCEs, and CBDs. So this isn't about new content. So those DOPS and OCEs that are written into your curriculum, they all stay. Nothing is changing there. It's just the way in which we're going to ask you to engage with those assessments that is going to change slightly. So for each of those assessments, for DOPS, OCEs, and case-based discussions, we're going to give you a clear definition and expectation, first of all, of the purpose of the assessment. So just in case you're all wondering why you're doing what you're doing, we're going to let you know. How the assessment should be conducted, who can assess you, the responsibilities of every participant in that assessment life cycle. So you'll be able to see what's expected of your assessors, as well as them being able to see what is expected of you. And we're also going to publish how the outcome of the assessment should be determined. So this really is the who, does, what, where, when, and how of assessments. But as I say, this is about how you engage with the assessment, not the content that is already written into your curriculum. So a bit of bigger news here. We are going to be rebranding competencies moving forwards. So in the future, competencies are going to be known as training activities. Again, just to be really, really clear, this is not the content in the curriculum. The things you're being asked to do are still going to be the same, and they are still outlined in the curriculum library. All you will see at the head of the column is the word changing from a competency to a training activity. The reason we're doing this is we've heard for a long time that the phrase competencies is just not quite fitting for the STP. It causes a lot of confusion with other systems that you might have in your department, which might also use competencies. I've had quite a few conversations over the last few weeks where I've tied myself in knots trying to talk about competencies in various different systems at the same time. It makes things very difficult. We are going to be introducing a work-based assessment standard for training activities. We're not asking you to use that work-based assessment standard for training activities. You may wish to have a look at it, you may wish to follow it, but you don't need to. We're also really aware that this change won't happen overnight. You've been using the word competencies for over a year now. I've been using it for a bit longer than that, and your trainers have been using it for even longer than that. Competencies aren't going to disappear overnight. But what you will start to see is us using the word training activities, and we'd like you to start adopting that as well. So going back to the standards, how are we going to check that these standards are followed? So the work-based standards are developed for all STP trainers and trainees to follow. So as I say, you'll all have the same information available to you. We're going to expect that all participants will follow the agreed assessment standards. And as we referenced earlier, there was a webinar for your trainers last week. The standards are going to support you, and they're going to support everybody else involved in your assessment to understand and agree how they should be conducted. We are going to quality assure the application of the standards via the e-portfolio. That's nothing for you to worry about. We will do that in the back end of the e-portfolio. You don't need to do anything different. You don't need to do any additional for us to be able to do that. You just need to follow the work-based assessment standards. So what I wanted to do is give you a very quick overview of the in-person work-based assessments that we're talking about here. I hope you're familiar with them by now, but I'll just talk briefly about them. So these are the assessments that are already included in the curriculum, and they're there to make sure you're developing the skills and knowledge needed to work as a clinical scientist. And each of those assessments types is designed to test a different element of that skill set. So as you hopefully will be familiar with already, the numbers of assessments you have to complete are outlined in the curriculum library in one file. Those numbers won't change. And we'll ask you to follow the work-based assessment standard when completing all of your in-person work-based assessments. So the first in-person work-based assessment is the direct observation of practical skill, the JOP. The JOP is in the curriculum to assess your practical skills. So we're going to publish a work-based assessment standard for observed assessments. So this will include the DOPs and the OCEs. As previously, you have to complete the number of DOPs specified for that particular module. And completing that assessment will result in an assessment outcome. That will be a pass or fail outcome. You'll get feedback from your assessor. If you pass, that can be used to continue to develop your practice. If you do fail that assessment, and you might, that is a hallmark of a robust assessment, that it is also possible to fail it. You can use that feedback to continue your development for when you retry that assessment, and you can do that. You can retry that assessment. So you may fail on your first attempt, and that is absolutely fine. And that feedback will help you identify your learning needs moving forward. So the OCEs, observed clinical events, which you will also be familiar with, these are designed to assess your communication skills. Again, we will be publishing a work-based assessment standard for observed assessments, and you have to continue, as you have done, to complete the number of OCEs for the module. Exactly the same process. This will result in an assessment outcome, pass or fail, feedback from your assessor, which will help you develop your practice moving forward. The third type of in-person assessment is the case-based discussion. So this assessment type is a little bit different and is designed to assess your professional and clinical judgment, problem solving and decision making skills. So we're going to publish a work-based assessment standard, as you might have guessed by now, for the case-based discussions. Again, you have to successfully complete the number of CBDs for your module, but in this case, it's a little bit different. You'll be discussing with your assessor an example, a showcase or a case study of your own practice in order to showcase those professional and clinical judgment, problem solving and decision making skills. Again, this will result in an assessment outcome that will be pass or fail. And as part of the standards, we will be publishing the pass and fail criteria, so you will be able to see those. And again, you'll get that feedback which will allow you to develop your practice. So I know you're familiar with all of those assessment types already, but I wanted to give you a really quick overview and just reassure you that the work-based assessment standards don't change these significantly. So we will be publishing those standards at the end of September to make sure all of your work-based assessments are run in the same way. I'll talk more about that information in a moment, but for now, I'm going to hand over to Boota to discuss the final assessment.
Hi, I'm Boota Singh. I look after the endpoint assessment service for the National School. So I just wanted to talk to you about your final assessment. Now, this is the objective assessment that is attached towards the end of your program. You will currently probably see this as the IAC on the school's website. We're removing the IAC and we're making adjustments to the new format of the assessment. There will be a final assessment and it will be in 2 parts. Could I just ask for the next slide, please? So it will be different. It will consist of a professional discussion with a number of standardized questions, and those questions are tied against your readiness to practice as a clinical scientist, which is the ultimate aim of the program. You will not be required to prepare and submit additional written work ahead of the professional discussion, as you do currently for the IAC. There will also be an element where you will look at a clinical case, and the clinical case will be able to test your ability to understand your scope of practice, your ability to reason and reflect on a project, on a activity or set of activities around something that you will face situationally within a workplace. So effectively, it's a situational judgment within a workplace. It should be within your scope of practice and it will be related to your area of professional work. There will be a rigorous quality assurance process to ensure that standards are applied consistently. So when we design all the questions for the structured professional discussion and the clinical objective cases at the end, we will make sure that every question and element is quality assured internally. So there will be a standardization between somebody who's an audiologist or a virologist. Obviously, the questions are going to differ depending on your specialism, but there is clear equity between yourself and other students who are trainees who are undertaking this assessment. We aim to provide the trainees and trainers with an update in November. The reason I'm not giving away a lot of detail because some of the developments are still in consultation with training officers, employers, external reviewers, and we will also be looking for the feedback from the trainee voice in there as well. So there will be an opportunity for me to engage probably through the STP trainee networks for them to comment on and consult on some of the final shape of the assessment. As I said, hopefully we'll be able to provide further information as the program develops. But fundamentally, it is not a huge shift from the IAC, though it will differ. It will be a face-to-face activity, hopefully, with all the caveats if there is any other major events. We will look to do this as within the same time frame as a summer sitting and a winter resitting for any resits or retakes. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Boota. Great, thanks, Boota. I'm going to do a little summary of what you've already heard, just so that we're extremely clear about what the assessment strategy means for you. So to put it very briefly, we're introducing new standards for in-person work-based assessment. That's your DOPS, your OCEs, your CBDs, and we're working on a new final assessment for you. Elsewhere, we're working on a new progression review process. This will not apply to you. This will apply, for example, to the new first years who had their induction day last week. It absolutely wouldn't be right for us to bring in a progression review process mid-programme for a cohort like yourselves who have already begun under the new curriculum, so this will not apply to you. You will see information about it circulating in the coming month or two, but this will not apply to you. What we've done here is to just put into a table to give you some more detail all of the changes that are happening and who they apply to. So you can see in the first column there, absolutely no change for the cohort that preceded you, the 2021 cohort, old curriculum. Progression review is the traditional or the current MRP process. Work-based assessment standards that we're bringing in don't apply to them. They continue to do the IAC. Moving to the right on the columns there, you are the 2022 cohort, so you are on the new curriculum. However, because we're introducing the progression process beyond the start of your beginning the program, the existing MRP process will apply to you. As Chris said, the work-based assessment standards for in-person assessments, the DOPS, OCEs, CBDs, will apply to you and will be published this month. And as Boota has summarised, there is going to be a new final assessment. As you can see in the other columns, the 2023 cohort, so there could be some coming into your department. They may even just have turned up today for their very first day at work. They will have more changes to the existing assessment strategy that they will work through, but they'll not have known any differently. So the full suite of changes will apply to them. And if you're a microbiology trainee who began in 2022, therefore you are under the old curriculum, you will also have MRP. And all I'm able to say today, and I'm sorry I'm not able to give you more detail about this because we're just finalising these decisions, but the extent to which any of the work-based assessment standards should apply to microbiology 2022 starters and the format of your final assessment, these are decisions that we're working on in the school right now, and we will write directly to all current microbiology 2022 starters by the end of the month, so that we clarify that for you. We don't want you to we don't want that to drift. We want you to know that as soon as is possible. So I hope that is clear. I just want to, before I hand you back to Chris, to mention where you can find this information, even that we're sharing today. Chris has got some more details to share with you shortly. So these slides will go up on the website, not until next week. A recording of this webinar will go on the website next week. The slides, in fact, that we shared with the trainers last week are already on the website and will be featured in next week's monthly memo. They summarise the same changes that we've summarised to you here. So look out in your monthly memos over the coming months, because links to current resources like the ones we're looking at today and the fuller details are all lined up to be published very, very soon on the school website. Chris, I'm going to hand you back control. I think I have to stop sharing in order to do that. It's back to you to pick it back up.
Thanks, Stuart.
There we go.
So yes, I'm just going to summarise again what is going to happen next for you. So I know you will have a lot of questions after today's session. We haven't answered them today, but we will do in the future. So as Stuart summarised there, we are going to be publishing the work-based assessment standards by the end of September. Those are going to be available for you to read and to work with from the end of September. And as Boota also mentioned, we'll be giving an update on the final assessment. There is lots of work happening on that at the moment. We'll be giving you an update in November. So where can you get more information? I know we've given you the wheres and what fors today, but we haven't given you all the information. So we're going to be publishing all of this information on the school website. but as Stuart suggested, we're not going to expect you to magically know when it's appeared. We will be emailing you directly to let you know when the relevant content is available for you, and we will share that with your trainers as well. We will also include that in the monthly memo, so please keep an eye on them. We get feedback that sometimes that we send too few emails, we get feedback sometimes that we send too many emails, but we want to make sure you've got this information. So on this occasion, we will be putting it in as many places as possible. So please do keep an eye on your emails over the next couple of months. We'll also be including all of this information, all of these changes in our training support and guidance. So you will start to see our website morph and shift to support these training standards in the future. And that will include starting to use the phrase training activities instead of competencies. We're also going to set up some explainer webinars shortly as well. I'm just getting the dates in the diary for those this week. So those will be in the monthly memo for you. Those are going to be a webinar looking at each of the changes that you are experiencing. So focusing on the work-based assessments for you. Those are going to be short half-hour sessions, and we will be taking Q&A on those sessions. They'll be available for both you and your trainers. And if you're not available at the time, we will record those and put those on the website for you. So those are going to be coming out in late October, early November for both you and your trainers. And those dates will be coming to you in next week's monthly memo. So please keep an eye on those. And if you can, join us at those sessions. That's all from us for today. I just wanted to thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening to us today. I want to give a huge thank you for anybody that has joined the conversation previously that did help us out with any of those conversations and that testing we did around the digital assessments. Although we didn't take that work forward, we did learn an enormous amount from it. So thank you very much from us today. Thank you for listening. We will be in touch is the message for today. As Stuart's outlined, as I've just gone through there, keep an eye on your emails over the next month and you will have all the information coming straight to you. That's all for us today. Thank you for joining us.